Okay, it's working.
Okay.
Mhm. So yeah, if we don't get many people, we can just go through those questions then, I guess.
Yeah, I've got the five. And we can do our little update as well with what's going on with the film and the website.
Mhm.
Chat is Jackard. Сейчас в момента чак точно се join launch. Се те спаните. Нищо, просто някакво. Това е точно спиралата, бро.
Ние ще се пуснем ли видео това?
Не.
So we're just coming on right on 8 o'clock here, and I'm happy to see. I see names. I don't see faces yet, but I'm happy to see those of you who could join us. I'll mention now that we're recording as well, and we're just maybe wait another few minutes if you're okay with that, just in case there's others looking to hop on, and then we'll get started. Just going to check on the Patreon page quickly, just in case anyone's got any questions. Oh, I can't do that while I'm recording, apparently. Interesting. Okay, well, I'll just have faith that people are not having challenges getting connected. Hi, Heather.
Hi, so excited to meet you both. I'm very
You,
excited.
you too. And feel free to unmute yourself, guys, anytime. We're a small enough group. I think we can probably, maybe I can mute everyone actually. Well, I'll let you do that because some of us might have background noise that we'd prefer to not have unmuted. So if you need to figure out how to do that, for those who aren't familiar, I think on the little taskbar at the lower left is where it is for me. You can mute and unmute yourself. Maybe on the, yeah, I think maybe in the top where our little squares with our name is, I think we can unmute ourselves there too. And if you wanted to jump in with your video, you could do the same on the lower left taskbar to jump in with video. Feel free to customize your experience however works.
Do you want to mention the little hand waving feature as well? Or?
That's a good idea. So I believe if you also on that taskbar, the same area where we're muting and unmuting, there's a manage participants little guy, two little silhouettes. And I believe you can click on that and have a choice to, I'm seeing something a bit different, I think, than most people, but I think,
When I click participants, I have an option to raise hand there.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I don't have that option, but so that's perfect. If you click on participants, you can raise your hand if you have any question or anything to share, to say. And I think, you know, if we're going to stay around a group this size as well, I think you know, we can maybe have a little cross discussion too. Maybe we'll do some questions or reporting or comments, and then we can open it up for a little chat. We'll kind of go with the flow. What do you think, Dan?
Sounds good.
Okay. So yeah, we'll wait just a couple more minutes, and then we'll get going. I will mention too that Dan's on a rural internet, which can be a little temperamental. So if he starts to freeze or fade, we may need to just wait a moment. But it usually comes back after a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might have been frozen now, Dan, actually. Oh, there you're back.
Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
I bet you're meditating.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were frozen with your eyes closed, so it did look like you were kind of
I'm
meditating.
just really, really still.
And yeah, those Min doesn't have a mic or cam. Okay, Min, if you wanted to have any questions, you could certainly type them in the chat as well, and I can just read them out from there. So that's no problem. So do you want to do an update, Dan? An update about what's happening with the Awaken the World?
Sure. Okay. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we've been up to. And I just came out of a 40-day meditation retreat, but during that period, it's really kind of rekindled a lot of creativity. So a lot of the projects that were in the works are starting to get really fueled again, which is exciting. So we're getting really close to launching a website. This is a new website. It's called awakentheworld.com. It's going to be sort of a repository for all of the films and all of the content that we're creating. We've got a whole lot of new teachings that are going to be coming. So those are going to be in all different formats on there. They're going to be in written format. There's going to be sort of a podcast with some of the teachings as well in audio format. And then the ones that are the most important are going to be made into either part of the next film or little mini films themselves. And of course, we're working on the next film all the time as well. And am I missing anything, Tanya?
I don't think so. You can maybe talk a little bit about what the next film will be about. What kind of, I know it's still in we're writing, but just maybe give a sense of what the next film will cover.
Yeah. So Samadhi Part 3, if we are calling it that, is going to be the Pathless Path. And so the first film was really showing, you know, why samadhi why it is even a thing, you know, like what have we lost as a society? What has humanity lost? And then part 2 is about what samadhi is, using different analogies and metaphors. And then part 3 is really going to be how to realize samadhi. It's going to be, to me, it's the most exciting one because it's going to be the most practical. It's going to be about the traditions and the you know, the ways historically that we've been able to reach samadhi, and it's going to be talking about the you know, it's funny because we ended samadhi part 2 with really saying, you know, there is no how to reach samadhi. You know, it's the how is the mind activity. So we're going to show the pathless path in part 3. We're going to talk about how to purify the mind and the self structure to realize what is always present, which is the true self. So so talking about the awakening process, which really isn't a process, it's just a waking up, and then the enlightenment process, which is the purification of the self structure, which is really about making the this vessel, this body, in making it pure in a way that awakening can stay in a more permanent way, so it will be less likely to come and go. So that's in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did anyone have any questions or comments about that? And we can just unmute ourselves and talk. We don't, maybe because we're a little group, need to hold their hand up.
This is Heather, if I may. I'm fascinated by this and just looking forward to the frequency shift that I'm sensing already. I'm a student of epigenetics, and I'm fascinated with the idea of how we can optimize our wellness by living with our gene map and also by lifestyle architecture, and also change our genes. I'd love for you to speak to that at the level you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. So to me, like the the DNA is of course it's the spiral. It's extending from the microcosm to the macrocosm, and it's the intelligence of the universe. So from what I understand of epigenetics, I'm not an expert, or I don't really know much about it really, but what I understand is there's fluidity, there's possibility within that spiral. We're not locked into the coding that is there at birth, but there are possibilities. And the way I see the path is that within the self structure, we're sort of doing two things in this this development process, or this you could say enlightenment process, which is the unfolding of that spiral. And so the first thing that we're doing is we're sort of purifying our existing conditioning. So that's what we've come into the world with. So so that's our biological imprint. This deep kind of reptilian craving and aversion that gets sublimated to all the different levels of self. So we're through meditation, self-inquiry, we're sort of disentangling our consciousness from that conditioned self-structure, and that includes what we've inherited from society as well, all of that conditioning as well. So we're purifying that, freeing our consciousness, or our sense of what I am, from being identified with that limited self-structure. But simultaneously, there's this, as we free our energy, as we free the prana from running in those conditioned patterns, that energy becomes free to explore the higher levels of self. So if you think of the self structure as like the tree of life, basically, we've most of humanity is living on the mental and physical, so these lower branches of the tree of life. But when that energy becomes freed, it starts to branch into levels of higher mind, and we can access the subtle levels of mind, and then beyond that, the causal layer of our being as well. So to me, that spiral extends through gross, subtle, and causal, and really the path of awakening is to to become free from all of it. Like all of it, the entire spiral is Maya. It's all illusion. So the more we grow, the more we expand our sense of self into higher mind, into the causal, and all these things, the more we have to be aware of the emptiness of all of it simultaneously. So it's like we're going in two directions constantly. We're expanding what we are, growing our sense of self, and purifying or detaching and realizing the emptiness of all of it, that it all is Maya. And to me, the freedom in that it's the game of Leela. It's to be able to play in the matrix. Well, I think you're muted there, Heather. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. I furiously typed because I didn't want to miss a drop, and I think I got it. That's lovely. Thank you for that transmission, frankly. That's an energetic transmission that I hope to revisit. I agree. I had never thought of the DNA reaching all the way to the cosmos, because, when I have my, what I call intergalactic moments, I do feel connected to every fractal, and to think of my DNA is doing the same thing is a lovely distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see us as like antennas. So, most of the time we're just, we're broadcasting with our antenna, and we're broadcasting an ego, a self structure. So, we can turn that around. We can make that antenna become a receiver instead of just broadcasting this ego. We can tune in to these higher levels of self, and I think that's really what meditation and purifying the sankharas or samskaras is all about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I may just ask one quick question about, do you know anything about the Wim Hof breathing technique?
I do. Yeah, actually, it was strangely a big part of my retreat, because we're in Canada here. My body tends to be very susceptible to cold, so it was a big part of my practice, actually. Yeah. So I think it's amazing. Just like for me, what it really does for me is obviously keeping the body warm, healthy, the immune system strong. So
can maybe and I'm going to type, I think it's WIMHOFF.
Yeah. He's back.
And so I'll type that in there if anyone wants to Googly Wim Hof. That's the fellow's name, Wim Hof.
My internet cut out there, Tanya, so mm-hmm. I missed what was being said. But
I was just saying, perhaps you can just talk a little bit about Wim Hof, just for folks who might be a little curious. Just a minute, nothing.
Sure. So the Wim Hof method is it's basically like a form of pranayama. So you are doing breathing exercises, and so you're really controlling the breath, and for me, it brings a lot of energy into the body, and then there's breath retention as well. So you hold the breath, and it just, what it seems to be doing is your capacity to hold energy just gets expanded, and then so you're filling the body with prana, and then there's a component where you gradually expose yourself to cold more and more. So going into a cold shower, or if you live where I live, just going outside every day is exposing you to cold. So and the body gets a capacity for just being able to be in the cold. So when you're in the cold, the beauty of this is, when you're in the cold, you don't actually have to do anything or practice. Like, it's just a byproduct of doing this practice, and you just are able to be in the cold. And I used to be extremely, my body would be shivering like if I was in a cold shower. And now it's actually incredibly blissful. I can be in a cold shower and it's just enlivening. And so it's, there's all kinds of health benefits. And if you check out his site, he's quite a fascinating character as well.
But it reminds me of the story Shinzen Young would tell about, being at these monasteries where, as part of the practice, he'd have to get up where it's, snow in the ground and pour freezing cold water on himself every morning.
Yeah.
That was icy cold. And that was part of the work, the meditation practice. And I'll share a very quick funny story, because we have the Samadhi Center up here in Canada. And we had a fellow visiting from, where was Carlos from?
He was from the
Argentina? Argentina, I think.
No, I think he's from the southern states. But
oh, that's right. Originally, he's from Argentina, but he lives in the States. And he was here, and it was winter, very cold. And he was practicing the Wim Hof method for some time. And so our center is in a very remote place, very quiet little town, and we kind of hide away. A lot of people don't know what we're doing. We don't have a sign. We're in a very kind of conservative little town. And so Carlos, being the true Wim Hof fellow he was, at minus 15 degrees, decided to walk down our road in his underwear. And if people didn't think we were already a little weird, he sealed the deal, because I'm sure word got round about this naked man walking around the center in minus 15. So I'll always have a nice memory of that and Wim Hof. So is there anything else anyone wants to ask about? There are a couple of questions in the chat, so but we have some time. So I'd like to give people an opportunity to just share. I like to keep it very informal and very conversational. So feel free to unmute yourself and have a chat if you feel drawn to do so.
I can't help myself. I just have to tell Tanya and Daniel how much I love you guys. I mean, it's beyond anything I can, it's wordless how much I love you guys.
Oh, I'm happy to, I see everybody here and I feel love. Like I really just want to, that's how this is our people, you guys are and it is the heart. This is exactly why we're here. And we're here. We're all here energetically connecting from, I don't even know, all over the world, I guess. So thank you, Peter. I'm happy to see you. I've been enjoying your communications with us.
Yeah, you've been communicating through your presence, your smile has been I felt you before you even said anything. So.
Well, I have to admit, one of the wonderful things about Krishnamurti is when he was helping everyone, he didn't see himself as special somehow. He said, we're just having a conversation here. I might be the telephone so you can get the information you're looking for, but, we're all one. And which is a little unusual because usually gurus and people who are, that they get around making themselves big and special and making money and all the identity things get wound in with it. But I just have to admit to you, Daniel, when I see your movies, I sit here and I think, he quotes a lot of very special, very powerful, very helpful people. I wonder if he realizes that he is one of them. You are spectacular. Here's the thing. When I cry anymore, I don't cry because I'm sad. I cry because I'm so happy. And you're making me cry, you son of a gun.
That's sweet.
Beautiful. It's beautiful, Peter.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, Peter, because I have been telling Dan that for years, the years we've been working together, is that you don't need to read any more books. You don't need to quote anyone else. You've got it. So so that's lovely that there's another person who's reminding him of that.
I love, one of the things I put in the Patreon thing is that I've been through 3 deaths now. And the last one, the really kind of slightly unusual thing about it is all of the wordless things, and I actually said this in my Patreon thing, but I'll repeat it here because it's important to me. One of the things that happens when you get enough of the connection with samadhi, all the wordlessness becomes accessible to your conscience, but you don't necessarily have words to say it. The reason for that is because every word is a separate little thought in our silly little conscious mind, and it doesn't necessarily apply with the words someone else has because you're using your belief about words and casting it into theirs. Well, good luck. Hopefully they have the same belief around those words as, on and on and on. One of the things that's so blessed about what you're doing, Daniel, is your words are they're excellent choices. Wordless may be dangerous, but you are making very good choices. And one of the most beautiful things about your movies is at the end of it, you always say, well, I've said too much now. This is all wordless. So you even know that. But let me just say, spectacular. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is so important, like the words that we choose. Like for me, like these films are really, just in terms of my own experience, it is so difficult to convey with words, and the film, it really is for me and for Tanya as well. I think it's a way for us to create a bridge between our inner experience and the outer world. And so it really is an exploration, and the more I explore it, the more, like, truly within myself I feel like I know less as I go on, even though I'm learning all about these different cultures and traditions, but it really there's it's and I, like, just looking at you, Peter, I just feel my heart right now, like I just feel like this is what it's about. It's about these intangible connections, and I don't know what's happening here. I don't know. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you feel it too, because I have to say, since I got out of the hospital, I mean, at first I couldn't articulate anything because it's all wordless, but my subconscious, well, it's a long story. I won't tell you the story, but anyway, over time, my ability to articulate things has come forward. But whenever I am connected to you through your movies or through whatever, I was like, oh my God, I feel so connected to him. I hope this isn't my identity, just happy I'm connected with him. I hope I'm connected from beyond us. And I think that's the fact of the matter. Our identities get to enjoy it too, but we're both here for a reason.
Yeah, I think we have these awakenings and these the samadhi experience, but then the self structure is always we're always working, we're always excavating. There's a phrase I love. It's always being Buddha, always becoming Buddha, and I think that's always true. I think there's no end point in this process. I think it's this beautiful, ever unfolding lotus, but at the same time, there's this at the center of the lotus. The jewel in the lotus is our infinite perfection. The awareness that is always already perfect. So we're our human experience is to make the outer or the self structure, like a home for this consciousness that, so that it can shine through.
One of the things that he's been pointing out to me recently is that we are all fundamentally love. That's what we are. So we go through life addicted to love. I mean, we want real love throughout our whole lives. The downside of that is that in our identities, all we can get is facsimiles of love. Now, some of those facsimiles are more real than others. And that's the beauty of when samadhi is, when you're opening to samadhi and you come into someone else who is opening into samadhi, we're both getting more true facsimiles of what we're experiencing between each other. And that's what makes it so powerful and so precious. And that's what makes your movies so precious, is you are such a good facsimile of samadhi. It's tremendous.
When I love your expression there, Peter, of more true, because we can't say what's true, we can't use words, but there is more true, and that's really well put. So I'm wondering if we can just address a couple questions in the chat. Dan, is that okay?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So Min, who doesn't have a mic available, unfortunately, asked about the difference between awakening and enlightenment, which is such a great question. It comes up quite a lot, and there's a lot of different ideas around that. But I'll let you give the official Dan Schmidt answer.
Official, okay. So awakening to me is the the recognition of what we are. Basically, our awareness beyond name and form. So the awakening is literally like waking up from identification with the self structure. For me, you really can't convey. It's the the part of us that is eternal, that has no qualities. It's purely the awareness itself. So when that awareness is present in a way that is not being mediated by the self structure, that's awakening, and that's always now. It's always this moment. There's no process to it. Whereas to me, the way I use the word enlightenment is whenever you're talking about a development process, or you're talking about anything that has to unfold through time. So, if you're using techniques in meditation, the long path of meditation, what you're doing in meditation is you're purifying the self structure. You're excavating into, finding the the unconscious patterns, making them conscious. All of that, all of enlightenment is for the self structure, and so the two, they go together. Like the challenge is, with awakenings. If we have a really profound awakening, like say we do some self-inquiry, we go really deep, and it just happens. Like awakening, that's the other thing. Awakening just happens. It doesn't, it's not mechanical. You can't make it happen. Like they say, you can become accident prone. It's like it has this sort of grace quality to it. So you can make yourself accident prone. And it's like this happy accident that happens. Whereas enlightenment is the work on the path. It's the, doing the meditation, doing your sadhana, basically to perfect the self structure, so that awakened consciousness can be there permanently. Because we often, almost always, when we have these awakening experiences, we'll lose it, and the self will come back, and even a very deep awakening experience, bit by bit, the self structure will come back, and often appropriated in a very subtle way that sometimes we don't even know. we might not know for a long time that the mind has come back and appropriated that awakening experience. So so we can be like we might in the presence of a teacher, like people I've heard have gone to see Muji or people like that, and they'll have these beautiful heart openings and awakening experiences, but that's not the end of the story. We have to be vigilant. We have to keep working, and so it's our meditation practice is this enlightening process, and then learning how that fits into our life. The insights that we gain from our sadhana, we have to be willing to let go of the conditioned patterns that are keeping us from being in that awakened state all the time. One of my teachers, he always says, "What are you willing to pay? What are you willing to let go of?" If you really want to be in that awakened state, you have to be able to pay, and there's only one currency, and that's that's yourself. You have to be willing to let go of that, whatever it takes to stay in that awakened state. And that, so that letting go, that excavating, that watching all the mind processes and all the conditioning, that is the development process, the enlightenment process, which is simultaneously purifying existing conditioning. And as I was talking about earlier, it's growing these other levels of self at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's good. Min, if you have any more questions from that, let me know. I can do a follow-up. So Min saying, is awakening a one-time event? Is it reversible? That's a really good question. Is it reversible?
Yeah. So my experience, it's totally reversible. I've had awakening experiences that happened very quickly and lost them just as quickly. So yeah, they're definitely reversible. And and I've had like people will have like small awakenings maybe thousands of times on their path. Like it depends. When we talk about awakening, like even just in a meditation practice, there are levels of depth of meditation, which I tend to use the Buddhist terminology. So I'll talk a little bit about the jhanas, or the states of meditative absorption. So when we are meditating, every jhana, or every level of absorption in meditation, there's like a mini awakening. Basically, there's a part of the mind, part of the activity of the self structure will stop, will drop away, and so there's a coming into presence when that part of the mind drops, and simultaneously there's an experience of more energy. So when that happens, when we talk about awakening, there are many, like in Buddhism, they have 8 different levels of jhana, or 8 different levels of meditative absorption. So we could be talking about, the first jhana, which when you experience that, it is an awakening. It's an incredible, it feels like your mind has gone quiet, and you feel this energy. But there are still many levels beyond that as well. So for me, I just in a typical meditation, I'll experience small awakenings. I'll experience levels of mind dropping away, and depending, if I'm in a retreat, I'll be at obviously a much deeper level, or if my practice is really strong, I'll be at a much deeper level than at other times. So there's to me, the awakening is it's something there, when the mind lets go, when the mind, we have these openings, the awakening is something that happens over and over. It's like the clouds, part, the clouds are the mind, and the sun is just there. The awakened awareness is just there. It's always shining. It doesn't go anywhere. But so the awakening is when it recognizes itself, and even that analogy. It's funny. These analogies sort of work and sort of don't work. But I for a long time used this analogy of the sun and the clouds. And the mind and the thoughts are obscuring the sun. But the truth is, we're always the sun. We've always been the sun. We're there's nothing. Even when the clouds disappear, it's not like we discover something on the other side of the clouds. What we wake up to is what we are, what we are here, what we've always been. So even these analogies are a little bit dubious, because when the awakening happens, it's so absurd, because you were already that.
Well, and I wonder, Dan, like we've talked about this quite a bit lately, but to me, like, are there not awakenings where there is a paradigm shift that doesn't go away? Like there becomes like a new understanding. So even though experientially we may not be in that, state, there is a permanent,
mm-hmm. Can you hear me? I think I lost my connection.
Yep, you're loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, there are, on the path, I would say there are pivotal awakenings which make a quantum shift in one's life. So, for me, there was an experience that happened when I was at the Zen Center, where it's like I recognized, the awareness, and truly, at that point in my path, even though my development process was not complete, even though the self structure still, I needed to be purified of sankharas, I knew I was not this anymore. I knew whatever it is I am, this awareness, it was a fundamental shift in my understanding of who I am or what I am, and there was never any going back from that. It's I think you've mentioned it, Tanya, in your own experience as well. It's like you recognize that you were playing a character. We've been playing a character our whole life, and suddenly we wake up and realize it's like we've been on this stage. We've been playing this role, and once you realize that, you can't go back to sleep and start playing that character in the same way.
And the realizing, I think, that's the trick of being on the path, is that, that's something, I've tuned into the non-dualist, the self-inquiry teachers, brilliant for years and years. And you have this intellectual understanding, this willingness to accept this, reality, but to be it. Mm-hmm. Is a whole different ball game. So it's tricky, right? And then of course you have this awakening, and then your mind hops back on, and yeah. So it's tricky.
So, and it's so interesting because the like the actual depth of the experience, like like in the awakening, we may be fully present, on the causal level, like we actually, like the emptiness or the form and emptiness may be awake in that moment. And then we, over time, even though we know that there are all these levels of self, we the mind comes back. It makes a story about this experience of being awake in the causal, even though the causal it's always available at the same time as well. But there can be a depth of that presence, and it's that depth of presence. This is the jhana that I was speaking of. Like we can be, if we're really, if we've purified this self structure, we could be at any level of absorption. And so even though we know, because of our experiences, we may have experienced samadhi over and over, but at any particular time, we'll be at a particular depth of absorption or jhana. So it's very, very tricky. And and that's why a meditation practice is so important, because it reconnects with the depth of that realization. So over and over, we can experience it, not just on the mental level, but or on a level, like we may have a sense of formless emptiness, but it may not be as alive in that moment. So so it is so tricky. It is so tricky.
It is. So if we can move, if that's okay. We do have a few questions, so I'd love to have a chance to try to get to as many as possible. I see that Alan, you're back on the video. Alan, do you want to talk? Like, just ask the question. I can read it. I don't know if your mic is working. You can unmute yourself on the bottom left, I think, near the little microphone icon. Or I can unmute you too, actually. There you go. Hi, Alan.
Yeah. Yeah. Recently, I had this experience of feeling something called the Great Attractor, which is described in astronomy as Laniakea. So this thing kind of, I was wondering if there is a chance to integrate technology into this whole experience in order to move humanity into this path. That's the whole idea of it. So I was wondering if there is a chance of experiencing this kind of revelation, or how to say it. Sorry. All right. Sorry.
Can you maybe describe your experience? Like, was this during meditation, or what is it exactly?
Recently, I had this experience. I was experimenting with certain psychedelics, which you described in the first episode of your series. So I had this feeling that there is some certain kind of activity there, and it was kind of trying to teach me.
Like an intelligence.
Yeah, like an intelligence trying to teach me in a certain way. And because I'm dealing with technology and programming, I was wondering if there is a chance for us as a human species to integrate this whole experience of samadhi into technology in order to make ourselves better in that. So
are you sort of talking about artificial intelligence? Like
kind of. Not just artificial intelligence, but I was feeling this great sense of attraction to some center or some point, which was like a bright light. And it was, if I could describe it, it was like a pure love from something. And at the same time, I was wondering, from your perspective, do you think that we need to give up on that as well in order to disappear, or should we proceed in following this path? I mean, following, trying to. All right.
I think I understand what you're asking here. I'm also reading your what you put in the chat as well, and so maybe I'll just see if this is answering your question. But so in the DMT experience, like there's many different levels of phenomena that can unfold, with ayahuasca or DMT experience, or the psychedelic experiences in general. And sometimes we can experience, you described love. We can experience, energy, lights. This intelligence, this spiral is teaching us. They say in the ayahuasca tradition that the vine is purifying us. There's an intelligence there. The thing to remember is, like, to me, I've used different plants as helpers on my path. I never sought them out. They just sort of showed up in my life. I had a vision one time that connected me with ayahuasca. And these things have shown me, these plant helpers have shown me levels of myself, levels of higher mind, levels of energy that I would, at that point in my journey, I hadn't realized on my own. So the caveat I always give people is, with exploring these things, all of this is Maya still. This is all, these are all levels of mind. Even these we can have like profound, beautiful experiences of love and being embraced, on these energetic levels. We can have communications with other beings, other entities, but it doesn't ultimately matter. You could be dining with Jesus, and it ultimately doesn't matter. Whatever's unfolding on a higher mind level is still not it. It's not the the awareness that doesn't come and go. There's a part of you. There's a part of you that is, present in that experience, and it's here right now. It's what is aware of me talking right now, and it's that awareness. Everything else is changing. Everything else is it's part of Maya and illusion. So until we are awake as that awareness that doesn't change, then we can get fascinated by these things, and we could spend quite a bit of time exploring these different things. So what I personally have felt is that I'm open to exploring these things, but at the same time I'm I just see it as an opportunity to do deep practice, and not not get hooked into experiences or get hooked into seeking states of consciousness, because as soon as we start seeking anything, that's the ego, it's the mind, it's looking for something to add to itself. It wants people. I know a lot of people who have gone on the psychedelic path, and it's tricky because they have very profound, beautiful experiences. They're, exploring themselves, but sometimes you can fall into this pattern where you're looking for a bigger, a deeper experience, or the next thing.
I understand that. The thing is that what I felt last time is like, I was wondering if I was presented with the path of following this feeling or give it up. But my question is, if I give up on that feeling and if I just disappear, wouldn't that be just egoistic? I mean, like, I would be an egoist if I just do that, if I just disappear from the trajectory of myself. I mean,
but how would that be egoistic to disappear? Like, if the ego is, the ego is always wanting more, right? It's an activity of always trying to improve itself, so if you stop that activity, if you stop all doing,
if I stop, I'll still be present, but I'll be present at all times. This is how I feel about it. I mean, if I stop to be, I'll be everywhere at the same time, and there is no time there. I mean, time, in terms of physics, time is just one dimension, and like there are like thousands and thousands of dimensions. And this is how I feel about it. And if I just give up on this one dimension of time and this one feeling of being myself, then I become like everything and everyone. And at that point, I mean, I'm just flabbergasted about it. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but it just I was feeling that this great attractor, something was like. Do you consider this experience, the psychedelic experience, as something that if it's trying to teach me, and if I can integrate this whole feeling and this whole experience and try to improve myself and try to improve humanity and try to integrate it into my life and into my professional work, do you think this could benefit others and basically just
yeah, absolutely. I feel these experiences, like when we're connecting to these higher parts of ourself, to me the plant, the psychedelic, it's just a permission slip. It's just a permission slip to connect and to realize these parts of ourself that are always there. So to me the DMT, I've had experiences similar to ayahuasca, just sitting in a darkness hut. The pineal gland can produce these things on its own, and so so we're communicating with ourself, and we're it sounds to me like there's an excitement in you around this stuff, right? Like exploring it, integrating it, connecting it to your computer world, and that's what life is. Like that's what we're doing in life, is we're branching, exploring with our energy. I think did we lose him, or did we lose me? Oops.
Oh, I hear you, Alan. I think we're just waiting for Dan to get back. There he is.
I disappeared. Sorry.
Basically, you're saying that these things that I experience, they're just part of some higher consciousness, but at the same time, this is just me in another way. Basically, I mean, it might sound like we're all one, and at the same time, I'm trying to communicate with myself in a different way, and this is just a part of me, and this is the part of everything that that exists. But in the grand scheme of things, if I try to encapsulate it, I mean, if I try to isolate it, my idea is just helping others. Isn't that like a good thing to do? If I can just deduct my conclusions and take like the wisdom that it gives me. If I'm communicating with my higher self, and if I use it just as a tool to just to help myself, and at the same time, if I'm helping myself, and if it tries to communicate with me, and if everybody else is just everything is just one, and I'm trying to kind of
yeah, I think I know what you mean. So yeah, like to me, you know, part of my path obviously is creating these films and, you know, doing this meditation where I'm doing the same thing. I'm connecting to higher parts of myself. And, you know, when we start,
it feels so alien. I mean, it feels so alien. It doesn't feel like it's a part of myself. It feels like it's trying to teach me, and sometimes it just punishes me if I'm not approaching it in the proper way. So
and that's you know, the way I describe it, like that energy, it does feel alien. You know, even when the Kundalini energy is moving in our body, like there is an intelligence there that you know, it seems foreign especially when it first awakens. It seems like this foreign intelligence and it does seem alien. But the more we inhabit it with our consciousness, the more it just over time just becomes more of you. It just becomes like everything else. So the more you can just, you know, allow it to be as it is, you know, go into it with consciousness, without resistance, and eventually the you that you are experiencing will encompass it. And it you know, I've had experiences, you know, connecting with higher levels of mind, and it was terrifying. The first time I experienced it was absolutely terrifying, and I felt almost demonic, or some weird presence was there, and it's because my ego structure felt threatened. You know, it felt like it was dying. It sort of was on one level. It was. You know, it had to surrender in order to connect to that. So the self structure is going to feel that fear. You know.
Sometimes pray helps. So do you see that like meditating in darkness, in complete darkness, actually helps? I mean, is this the way you do it? I mean, is this the way you recommend to meditate for a long periods of time? So, because recently, I mean, as far as I know, you've done this 40 days of silent retreat. Did you do it in the darkness? How did you do it? What's the practice? What's the technique? Would you recommend something? Because I would really like to experience and explore things on my own without the use of different molecules in my brain that just interact with my consciousness. But I want to explore this on my own, and what would be the best kind of practice in order to achieve that?
So like I've explored absolutely everything on my path. So not absolutely everything, that's not true, but I've explored so many different things. So, you know, I've you know, I had a flotation tank, which I had for many years. So you're floating and in a sort of sensory deprivation. You know, I've done periods of time I have a darkness hut on the property. So I've been in there for days at a time, and I've experienced changes in the pineal where it starts to secrete DMT. And all of those things were part of my journey, part of my practice at the time. They showed me what I needed to see at that particular point in time. So I would say, you know, explore all of it, like just whatever you're drawn to. Just go into it. And I don't think there's any one thing, you know, that I could say. Like for me now, you know, the meditation that I you know, teach at the center here that leads to samadhi. You know, on samadhi.ca, there's the guided meditations that I have on there. Those are what I would put forward as, you know, if you are looking to get grounded in a meditation practice, you know, those guided meditations will.
I tried some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fairly honest, some of the visualizations you make in your movies, they actually represent some things that I have experienced on some of those substances. To be fairly honest with you.
Yeah.
I know it's just cheating. I mean, for me, I mean, it's just cheating the system. This is how I feel guilt for that. I mean, I feel like guilty for like cheating the system. But that's why I've tried to meditate so many times, and I'm trying to integrate this into my everyday life. And at the same time, it feels like a healing experience if I meditate for 15-20 minutes a day, right? And trying to get a proper posture and reading like Patanjali and the Yoga Sutras and stuff like that. And I'm asking if do you think, like, because I feel like there is a possibility for me meditation to disappear, and I become nothing. And if I become nothing, what happens after that? I mean, there is if I become nothing, if I become nothing, at the same time I become everything, but there is no time. I mean, there is.
Yeah. So there's, you know, I think, you know, within the peak experience, we have these peak experiences of, you know, the dissolution of everything. But, you know, the more, you know, like I talked a little bit about awakening versus enlightenment. And, you know, the enlightenment process is to, you know, purify this self-structure so that we can directly experience ourselves as, you know, as all of it and emptiness simultaneously. You know, in the Heart Sutra, they say, like, form is emptiness. Emptiness is exactly form. You know, so this is it right now. Like what you're experiencing, you know, this body, this mind, thoughts, all of it is the emptiness simultaneously. So, you know, the only reason we're not experiencing that is because this human experience is being filtered or mediated through this self-structure right now. So the practice is to make the self-structure more purified or permeable or whatever you want to call it, so that it allows this awareness to be awake as this. It's not something separate from this. This is it right now. This moment is exactly the emptiness, you know, and the emptiness is speaking as you. It's speaking as me. It's all these people. You know, that's it right now. But we have these minds that are creating these little boxes. You know, all these little boxes on top here. You know, it's all mind. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I should throw in one of the things that I've gotten recently is you are every atom, and there are no atoms.
And it's like infinity, basically. It's like you experience infinity, and on the grand scheme of things, and the micro and the micro and the macrocosm and the micro scale of things. So experiencing this kind of thing, you just become. It's stupid to say that, but you become one with everything, kind of. So
yeah, and it. I think and
Dan and I will talk when Dan and I have conversations, and I think and I can see we're not even going there, we're there. We can talk from a relative perspective and we can talk from an absolute perspective. And when we talk from the relative perspective, like there's me and you guys and, then we have to make concessions, like we have to kind of pretend a little bit that this is happening in the way that our mind body is experiencing it. And, I think, Alan, you're saying you have this realization, well, I am everything. And that is the apt perspective. We still need to maybe go to work and hit the bank machine and feed ourselves and have relationship. So I think what Dan was saying is, so to be able to weave the two experience, to merge them, which from the absolute perspective, there is no merging, but from the relative perspective, to be able to be that, that everything and nothing at the same time is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and this is the path, the sadhana, the pathless path is to over time, these practices, the meditation practices, help to merge the relative and absolute, so that it's not, and to me, the psychedelics that I've experienced, like it's given me, a profound sense of the actual dissolution on an energetic level, because we can talk about this stuff, but when you actually experience yourself dissolving into everything that is, it's, to me, there's a benefit to that. It makes the illusion more obvious, and for me it was important on my path. So I would say, don't be guilty about exploring those things, but at the same time, just understand that they are permission slips, that you don't need them, but they may show you aspects of yourself that are available to you and that you can reach through meditation and in life.
Right. So my last question there is, I told you about the feeling of this great attraction feeling, about this kind of light, love, and should I give up on that one? I mean, like, in order to disappear, in order to become, I mean, words cannot describe it, as it's words. Just
so you're asking me if you should go into the light?
No. There's the light, and there's like the last desire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I would say, my experience with whether it's in a psychedelic experience or in meditation or in life, if we can let go of the egoic agenda, let go of any doing or any ask yourself in that moment, where you have a choice, is your mind manipulating in that moment? Is your mind mediating in that moment? And just notice what is in operation in the limited self-structure, and just let it go, drop it. As soon as you notice that the mind is mediating, let it go, and that, trust that intelligence. That intelligence that is unfolding knows exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.
And I'd like to wrap up, because we'll move along, to say that it's okay to not know. It's okay to be confused. We don't need to know anything.
That's exactly it.
So that's a good place to be too. So let's move on. Thank you, Alan. That was there was a lot of really good ground covered there. So thank you for sharing that. That was amazing interaction. Andra, I don't know if you're still with us on the call, and you did ask a little bit about the 5 aggregates and the thought process, and Dan can talk about that a little bit, or if you wanted to unmute yourself and talk about it.
I'm just reading the little note here.
I know that some people are kind of on the move and
so
may not be able to join in the call.
Yeah, so the five aggregates for people who don't know what that's referring to, they call them the five skandhas in Buddhism. So these are the skandhas. You could say it's like a functional model of the self. So we've been talking a little bit about like a developmental model through time, but the skandhas are having to do with how the mind works in terms of its processing. So so for me, you know, it's been extremely useful on my path. And people who do vipassana meditation, where they're observing sensation at the deepest level possible, they're actually working with the skandhas. So for me, you know, there's different ways. Like at my 40-day retreat, I was working with the phenomena of the self structure at times quite a bit. So purifying the sankharas, which are conditioned patterns. So I'll just briefly go through the skandhas. So the first skandha is our body, rupa, which is just this form, and on the body, sensation is arising. So you can think of you know, we're being bombarded with wave phenomena continuously, and the senses are filtering that wave phenomena. So you know, like you could see, like the ears are just filtering out a tiny little frequency, you know, between 20 and 20,000 hertz, and that's what we call hearing. But it's just wave phenomena, and you know, visual is just filtering out a tiny little bit of the spectrum. So the second skandha is called Vedana, which is it's just this awareness of the wave phenomena that is prior to filtering. And if we can start to observe, you know, that another word for it would be prana, or just energy. So if we can start to attune to the pranic field, feeling this sensation without discriminating using the mind. So when we feel something, we're not labeling it as a good feeling or a bad feeling. It's just phenomena. It's just vibration. So in when we're working with the skandhas in meditation, you know, the habit pattern of the mind is to have preferences, to be always preferring good sensation, and to be pushing away what we perceive as painful and bad. So the whole process of working with the skandhas is just to be non-reactive. Whatever sensation is arising, we just have no preference. We stop reacting, and we start to come out of the habit pattern of the mind, and we can start to inhabit this Vedana level, this level of pure vibration. Because most of the time we live in the other skandhas. The other skandhas are sanya, which is discrimination of this and that. It's the third skandha. The fourth skandha is the sankharas that I've been talking about. So that's our conditioned patterning. So if something happens, you know, I have a whole mental construct and memory connected to that thing, and so I'm not experiencing something new in the moment if I'm filtering it through those mind structures. So the skandhas are you know, it's an amazing device to work with in our meditation. Is there anything you wanted to add, Tanya? Or?
So, and Andra just sent a message saying, "Hey, actually, my question's about retreat." So we'll bring it back to the question that she mentioned was about whether the 10-day retreats, I think, I'm just going to pop back up there, would expand your experience. And I think, and I'll maybe have a quick answer to that, and that is going to any retreat, I think for any length of time, is an accelerator on the path with our practice. So the longer, theoretically, the better. And with the Samadhi Center, even for the 10-day retreats, we don't require that anyone be an experienced meditator. We've had people come for a weekend retreats that have never meditated before, ultimately, and they enjoyed some really beautiful insights that came to light for them. So I think for anyone who feels drawn to meditation and to retreat, to jump on that. I think there are some centers where there may be a level or a prerequisite for some experience with meditation, but there are other accelerators. But I think there's nothing that quite can do what retreats do for us in terms of leaving life behind, moving away from our patterns of work and family and relationship and environment, and then just having that uninterrupted span of time, whether it's for a day, a weekend, 10 days, 30 days. In my experience, I haven't been on retreat near as much as Dan, but and of course that's why he went on his 40-day retreat. So maybe we can segue into that now, Dan, because that is a question on as well. If you could speak briefly about it. I know we're heading close to our wrap-up time. I'm happy to go longer, but I
Sure.
also wanted to try to get to the next few questions if we could. Do you want to talk about retreat?
Sure. So, like a lot of what you said is what I would say as well. It's just an amazing opportunity to stay in presence and to really break the habit pattern of the mind. For me, a lot of my patterns are working with films, being on the computer, just all these day-to-day things. It's amazing when we stop the activity of the self structure and we can just be in presence for an extended period of time. It's deep rewiring starts to happen within the self structure, and for me, the 40 days, it's interesting, like the evolution. At the beginning, I found it necessary to be in silence. I think it was for the first 10 days or maybe the first 2 weeks, like very, very, just completely within myself. And then it was interesting because the awareness, I felt like it was starting to break through that silence, and Tanya was joining in every day as well. And there was a point where we felt more free in the experience to be able to connect to each other, and it seemed like the practice, or what was unfolding with the energy, it was more important at that point in the retreat to make a bridge and to be able to because if we're just meditating for days and days and days, we may be in a samadhi state, but it's amazing practice to try and maintain that state while connecting with another person, or trying to do different things in life. So during the retreat, it was interesting because there was a degree of freedom that came where I wasn't just on the cushion continuously. It was at a certain point about maintaining samadhi while doing other things as well. And there wasn't a lot of mind. I wasn't reading books. I wasn't, I had no things that were typical triggers for my mind activity. A lot of my activities were doing things like, brushing off the solar panels or bringing in wood for heating and that type of thing. And it's amazing just to be able to stay in presence while doing these simple activities is, it's very challenging to maintain the depth of presence, the depth of presence that one has while on the cushion in a very deep state.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it was interesting. I would kind of fly, come in for the day and meditate and leave. And we were, for the first chunk of the retreat, I'd avert my eyes. Like we'd have no communication at all. I wouldn't look at them. There's no talking. And so I was in charge of the Awaken the World empire, emails and invoices and business and emergencies and people need, all these things. And so I was having so much stress, and I had this list of quasi urgent matters, and I'm like, please let him talk to me, please. And so when he was like, I think I'm at the point I can talk, it was just huge relief for me, because I could check in with him on a whole bunch of things. But it's interesting what was happening when that happened is, Dan started to share with me, really a lot of our communication was around what was happening. So we tried to limit. I didn't say, hey, what was happening in my day, or guess what happened at the grocery store. So we stayed within his practice primarily and mine. And but early on in the retreat, he said, I'm going to start writing. And I think you were reading the Red Book, Carl Jung's Red Book. Mm-hmm. And I went, no, because the Dan pattern was coming back. It was, and that's what he does. So he was able to, and I think that's an important thing about being at retreat or practicing with other people is I think it's impossible to really see our patterns at play and really see when our mind has appropriated, which is, something I'm familiar with, unless we have a mirror, unless we have someone who can really, someone who it's not easy to find, teachers or guides or a real live person. Was that Dan?
Just having someone who can tell you the truth when you're doing something stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, the levels of mind. It's so interesting because the levels of mind that one experiences, it's the mind is such a tangled web, and as we're moving through the jhana levels, we can hit layers of mind, and they can come up very forcefully, and we just don't know. We get lost.
So tricky.
Yeah, it's very tricky. So tricky. Having someone to reflect back where you're at is amazing. Mm-hmm. And Tanya actually had an awakening experience. She was doing an incredible amount of meditation every day as well, showing up and doing long sits, and had a very profound awakening experience. And maybe you want to share?
Which was surprising. Well, I think we'll go on with the questions, but it was a neat surprise because it was, I wasn't expecting to be taken along for that ride. Mm-hmm. But Dejan, I want to say your name properly, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that. I'm going to unmute you. Or can you unmute? Are you able to?
Just 1 second. Yeah.
There you go. We can hear you. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, it's actually Dayan, but
Dayan. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
My apologies. So Dayan, did you want to ask Dan your question?
Yeah. It's a simple question. I mean, do you have to be in a perfect physical health in order to get awakened? I mean, prana has to flow properly. I mean, can you still get an experience of awakening while you are physically ill? That's the question. Very simple question.
That's an amazing question. You know, it makes me think of Ramana Maharshi. I don't know if you're familiar with.
I am.
So he, you know, he said it beautifully. He was at one point in his life sick with cancer, you know, and someone asked him that question actually, and he said, you know, the body, of course, is going through, you know, this sickness, but what does that have to do with me? You know, and it was such a profound answer, because his awareness, you know, has absolutely nothing to do with the body, but yet, you know, here's the tricky part is, you know, he had completed his sadhana, right? He had sat for years in temples, you know, to the point where he had purified the self structure, and you know, to the point where he, you know, insects were eating his body, and he was you know, grounded in the self, in the awareness. So, you know, so it's a, you know, I don't have an answer in the sense that it would apply to everyone, but there's you know, there's again the relative and absolute. Like from the absolute perspective, you know, there's, you know, nothing really matters. Like you know, my diet, if I eat some bad food, you know, of course the body's going to be in distress. My energy's not going to be flowing properly, but you know, the awareness that is beyond name and form, how can eating something affect my awareness or my you know, my consciousness? So but at the same time, you know, when the body is really heavy and energy is not flowing, it's like the spiral, you know, the illusion of being entangled with form is more acute. You know, the density of the spiral is more, you know, it's entangling, you know, that awareness in Maya. So it is, you know, so from the relative perspective, of course, it does matter. It does matter doing, you know, I found at my 40-day retreat, you know, I was doing a lot of physical exercise. I was doing pranayama. You know, I was dragging wood every day. And by the end of the retreat, I was in pretty good physical shape. And I found that within the self structure, having that, you know, the energy flowing well within the self structure was a benefit. It was definitely, you know, I felt that the awareness was sort of shining through more than it was at the beginning of the retreat. So,
yeah. That almost answers my question, though I was a little bit, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, can you even expect to get that experience? I mean, if some of your chakras are completely blocked, and I think that in order to see that, to get awakened, I mean, the energy has to flow properly through the chakras. And so if you are physically ill, so don't even expect to get that experience before you get healthy completely. Is that true or not?
I don't think so, because I've had actually my first awakening experience was I was extremely sick. Actually, it was I was at a Vipassana retreat. It was about 20 years ago, and I was a mess. Like I was going through a serious health crisis. I had manifested rheumatoid arthritis in my body. My chakras were, I didn't even know I had chakras at that point. You know, I had no awareness of energy flowing in my body. There was a whole area. I had diabetes as well, type 1 diabetes. and the whole area of my body was offline basically. And so at that retreat, I was working very, very hard. I was doing, meditation that I'd never done before. And, so energetically, I was definitely breaking through layers of resistance. I was giving it 100% of my effort that I could make at that point. But definitely my body was in, energetically a terrible state, but I had a samadhi experience, very, I went into like a Savakalpa samadhi experience, which was a full, experience of being everything that is, being, I could feel myself in everyone and everything. And
and maybe I'll chime in and then we'll move on. But what I'll say, Dayan, is maybe Peter can nod if he agrees. Is the three? I've had three profound awakenings, and I'm pretty sure all three times I was dying, like physically dying.
When
And
your body is down, it actually opens you to the truth.
well, what my body was dying, and it was when I surrendered to that, truly surrendered to the reality of that moment and let go of myself. I had the most profound experiences. So it's sometimes the walls become windows unexpectedly.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's a good way of saying it.
That helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Heather, are you still there? I see your screen is off and your hand is up. I'm sorry we didn't get to you sooner. I'm gonna just yay, Heather.
Hi.
Yay. Okay, Heather. Sorry about that. Wait.
Oh, that's okay. I was gonna do my juicing, but I'll skip my juicing.
Awesome.
You and I had shared a lovely dialogue via Patreon, and there were points when Daniel, I'm watching the documentary, and it's just wave after wave of, come on, baby, you can get there. Here, we're just touching the Godhead. Come on, it's wave after wave at this very high level, and I loved it. And then at one point, I come from a lot of trauma, like most of us, and the trauma part was like, nice work if you can get it. I can't. You're too. I can't get to that. It was kind of frustrating for the part of me that was like, what do you, I just couldn't speak that really. And so I dialogued with Tanya about how, first I'll say it's a really important place for what you're doing and who else is doing it. And so thank you. So if you just do this, it's great. And I was thinking, wow, given your perspective and your multi-layered submersion in this kind of visceral understanding of creation, digging all the way deeper to the mulch and like bringing the rest of us up there. And so she talked about maybe future projects. So I just want, if you could speak to that a little bit, that, the parts that are too splintered to meet up at this juncture kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think the little, and I might be repeating what we shared, Heather, because this is something that's definitely more on my radar. I think that Dan's being someone who does experience PTSD and has through my meditation. And I used to, before Dan and I connected, I lived in a different town and did a lot of meditation on my own. And I had no teacher. I did have a teacher. I was just starting to work with my teacher, but I spent a lot of time alone working through the Sankaras. And it was terrifying. I called them my strolls through hell, and it was just with my temperament, I don't know why I stayed on the cushion and I pushed through, but I'm appreciating that not everyone, that's not an option for everyone. And that for people with trauma, like you said, it's not, I think unfortunately it's most people on the planet to different degrees. But with the PTSD,
permission to sit down. A lot of us don't even have permission to stop because we're fleeing for our lives. And so I see meditation as this privilege in some ways. Go ahead though.
Yeah, well, and to me, I'm certainly not an expert. I've done a bit of reading and just trying to be able to be more informed as someone who leads meditations. And so I know how really, unless we're in, what they call the window of tolerance, which is a lot to do with the nervous system.
Yeah.
So we talk about that at the retreats, and it's tricky because you talk to someone like me. I'm just like a bull. I'm just like, I just go, and I feel like a bull in a china shop. Sometimes I'm not very gentle with myself, and there's sometimes in an unhealthy way, and sometimes in a productive way. And moment to moment, it's hard even to try to assist people on the path when they're on retreat, because sometimes you need to feel like you're in hell. And and for me, the times, like I said, I've felt like I'm dying, have been incredibly productive. I always think of it as going through the eye of the needle. It's this incredible, like, condensing of myself energetically, and it feels like it's not possible. And then as soon as I shoot through the eye, this huge expansion and shift. So, but we have to be careful with people because we're not therapists.
This is how I've heard it described. What were you going to say, Dan?
Oh, I just wanted to add a little quote from Rumi. One thing I love is he says, "The wound is where the light enters you." And to me, like if we practice the wound of our heart, or the wound of love, whatever it is, these places in us that are deeply painful, it's like what Tanya was saying, when we can open through that, it's not about perfecting our self structure in any way, but opening exactly as we are, and just feeling fully what is.
Almost 10 years ago, I did 2 years of psychotherapy because I had reached a point in my meditation. At that point, I'd been meditating 10 years, and I was stuck against the wall. And it felt like it wasn't safe for me to go any further on my own. And so I went into 2 years with an amazing psychotherapist who's also a meditation coach, which was a great marriage for us. And it was only with her help that I was able to kind of climb over that wall. I couldn't have done it on my own. And so, I think meditation is not the cure-all, and sometimes it's not the time to meditate, because if you're not in the window of tolerance and you meditate, you can actually re-traumatize yourself. And so we have to be very careful, and people come on retreat, and I think we do our best to support people. People are, Dan's available. We're both available every day on retreat to talk to us at any time. He in personal meetings or interviews, but there's only so much from where we sit that we can even recognize. And I can't pretend to know how to help people the best in a moment. So there's an element of trust that people are hopefully caring for themselves in a way that is helping them, whatever that looks like. It may be not meditating.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting me share that. I just, I got so excited, and, I just can't wait to see the next project because it only is deepening, yes?
We don't even know what it's going to be. We're excited about it too. And I'm one of my passions is to do a version of the Samadhi film for children and teenagers. So that's something that's going to be probably not going to happen for a few years till we're done this next film, but I'm really excited about that. Yeah. Try to get the seeds planted a little sooner.
Lovely.
I think, Dan, maybe there's one more question, then we can wrap up. If you have to jump off the call, I want to say thank you everyone for coming. It's such a delight to see you and chat with you. I'm freezing cold. That's why my voice might be getting weird. I'm in this room. My fire's going in the other room, and I don't even know what the temperature is here. But I'm literally shivering. But I thought we had. Oh yes, Oksana. Oksana had a really amazing question.
Oh, I see it here. Okay.
Yeah, and Oksana, I don't know if you're there and can unmute and talk, or I can just read it. I'll just give maybe a couple seconds here to see if she jumps in. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I see a message here. I'm just going to see if that's from her. Oh, there she is. Okay, Oksana, are you able to? Do you have a mic? Did you want to, or do you want me to just read your question out?
Why don't you just read it, Tanya?
Sure. And Oksana, in the meantime, if you want to unmute yourself and if you're able to jump in, then feel free. So Oksana says, do you still read books or watch something? What do you do when you cannot find anything interesting, important, but still have free time? So basically, the more you meditate, the less, I guess some of our interests do seem to fall away. Mm-hmm. And we still live in society and do some things that are normal, in quote. So yeah, that's an amazing question. It does sometimes feel lonely. As I was saying, when I was doing that meditation on my own for those years, it was incredibly challenging to not have a real live person to share the practice with. Did you want to talk about that, Dan, a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and I think, like, for me, my relationship to reading and books has kind of changed as well. Like at the beginning of my practice, like 20 years ago, I was just devouring stuff, like everything related to the path, and I it's like I wanted to understand and know everything about it. So the mind was hungry. And now, I still read a lot. I still consume a lot of books, but I don't feel the same, like I'm trying to get anything from it. It's more now, like creating these films and doing the work. The connections I'm making are more for the art and for the projects. And so gathering and bringing things in, in order to create these different things. So I would say for me, I'm not, like, my relationship to these external things has changed. I'm not seeking anything in them the way I used to. And
we also do very normal things, like we've gone, I don't know if people aren't from Canada may not be familiar with it. We have a huge amusement park here called Canada's Wonderland. And it's like, we've had a neat meditation experience at the park, but we watch Netflix. We watch silly shows because there's only, for me personally, sometimes I just want to kick back at the end of the day and eat a bag of something crispy and just watch something, just entertainment. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, it's not about, it's not about, putting some leash on the self structure or it almost doesn't matter what you do. It's just, keeping tabs on, the attachment to what you do. I think that's the best way to say it, maybe, is it's not what you do, it's your attachment to what you do. So, just keeping, we talk about the little bosses in the films. And, we all have these little bosses that around food or around money or whatever it is. And, these are all parts of us. They're part of the self-structure. We're managing this whole thing. And so we of course, just, if we're in awareness, we keep tabs on these parts of ourselves. And, but it's not about starving them or denying them. We're here to experience all the facets of life. So I'm not into denying myself stuff, and we just enjoy life, and but also try and be vigilant, just because we'll create suffering if these little bosses get out of hand. So to me it's about finding a balance.
Well, and trying to find a community, maybe, which can be tough, where to find people. To me, I'm excited about this call, like this is the beauty of technology now, is we can meet from around the world and connect. And, I look forward, and we invite you all, we've had great exchanges over the Patreon page and email and here. And Dan, like, we're often, I think probably at least weekly, we just connect on Zoom one-on-one or Skype or call. We'll have calls, like people will just connect and say, hey, can we chat? Or I have a question about my practice. Like this is it. This is the most important part of the Awaken the World work is, and the part we enjoy most is to actually expand our community, because it is hard. I love what Heather wrote about Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff is the Fourth Way guy, and I love he had such a neat path and teachings that he shared. And the quote is, "Our friends are starting to find us uninteresting," and Gurdjieff says it's only the beginning. And it is hard to kind of roll in the same circles as I used to. Relationships have changed for me, including with close family. And so your world can shrink a bit, but at the same time, the connections that I'm making, I feel a real connection.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Now that we've got the ball rolling, I think this is something that we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis, and it'll be amazing. To me, I have had to let go of many different groups of people in my life, and I've sort of been reborn in different incarnations, and and it's okay. It's okay to let go, and sometimes the people you let go of will come back at other points in your life, and but if we don't do that, the gravity or the inertia of the consensus reality, I guess you could call it, will start to pull you back into its midst. So so there is, I think it is important. I see, like, what we're doing, we're jumping to a different orbit, and that takes energy, and to stay at that orbit and not get pulled back, it takes your energy, and so sometimes you have to make those energetic cuts to stay where you want to be.
Or and maybe do a survey for time for people, because I know there are many different time zones to consider. So maybe we're pretty flexible on our end. We just picked this to see if it would work. But so yeah, why don't we do that, Dan? What do you think? We can just do a standing date every month.
Yeah, I think Sundays, Sunday night is probably good, or maybe trying different times, like you said. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can send around, I think, a survey form. I've done them with other organizations, where people can check off good time. So we ran late. Now we now know to make it 2 hours long and start maybe a bit earlier. Feel free to unmute yourself. I'd like to maybe wrap it up. I've got a 12-year-old waiting to get to bed, so I'm going to need to wrap up myself. Does anyone want to last words or comments, or we're all good?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I love you guys. And the Patreon community, it was a new thing for us, and it makes us frankly feel less alone, because it's a little, you know, two people in the basement or at the center, and it's very it brings an amazing energy to the projects when we really connect to the people who resonate with the work, for sure.
Here's my final message. I love you.
Thanks, Peter.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We are going to put a recording of, you've already heard what we've had to say. Thank you, Dayon, for coming. Thank you, everyone. And
thank you very much.
We'll put the video on and we'll post the next date. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good night, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are.
Good night.